Hi, I'm Zach Kazan, managing editor at Worn and Round. I'm joined today by Zach Weiss, co-founder at Worn and Round. Zach, how's it going today?
It's going excellent.
That's great. We have a bunch of independent watches on the table. One of these we had in for review recently. We still have it in for review, obviously. It's on the table. And it kind of inspired us to just like get a bunch of independent watches out on the table. Just kind of like talking about what we love about indie watches at this particular moment. Maybe some of like the pros and cons, why they're kind of like why their stock is rising for both of us, compared to kind of like the conglomerate-owned brands. I think we should probably start with the watch that sort of inspired the conversation, which is the new watch by Holtenrichs. This is the Ornament Lab, the second Ornament Lab watch they've released. This is in collaboration with the dial artist. You saw this watch before I did, and you sent me a Slack message that said, wow, this is really impressive. I'm paraphrasing there, but
Something along those lines. Might have been some expletives. I don't know.
yeah, probably. Kind of an unusual response from you. I have to say, like, you're an excellent, evaluator of watches. You've seen a lot of watches. I haven't really seen you as like blown away by something on first pass as this. Tell me why.
I mean, this is just like one of the most striking watches that has like come into my orbit in a long time. And like, I say that getting to see an awful lot of watches, like you said, and that includes, was in the Vacheron boutique last week. Beautiful watches. Like this still to me is like far more evocative than those watches.
Yep.
And it's just, it's amazing when you like open up a box of, I honestly didn't know what watch we were getting, and there was this box from Holtenrichs, and I opened it up and it's just like wow, like a genuine wow moment. And like I'm one of those people, like I'm rarely very excited. I kind of say, don't ask me if I'm excited. Like I look forward to things, but I'm not an excited person. This is an exciting watch. Like this just, I couldn't wait to put it on. I couldn't wait to take photos of it. It's one of the most photogenic watches.
Yeah, the
I've
photo.
ever.
Yeah, your photos look great. We have them on the website. It's very very fun watch to photograph because there's so much going on.
Yeah, you can just get lost in all the little details. And yeah, I mean, it mixes. There's just so much going on here. I mean,
Yeah.
you have this Art Nouveau 3D printing thing. You have this like chaotic but beautiful dial with gold leaf on it. And like, yeah, it's an incredible watch. It really is.
This was a really satisfying watch for me to kind of like spend some time with because I've been following Holtenrichs for a long time. They kind of came on my radar years ago. I was very interested in them before I ever saw a Holtenrichs watch in person. They just have this design language that I think is like really unique. It's inspired by architecture and like the lines of classic cars and just like you said, there's a lot going on. It's very complex, but immediately identifiable as a Holtenrichs
Oh
watch.
yeah.
And for a long time, I feel like the brand was sort of like stuttering, maybe a little bit. They had a lot of things going on, we have a good relationship with them, and they promised us samples, and there were delays, as is normal, I think, for especially for an ambitious watch. So we finally got this watch, and I have to say, like, just like completely blew away like all my expectations. And before this, I think the most I had seen from them are like cobbled together prototypes,
Yeah.
of watches at our meetings that we have with the team in Geneva, each year. And it's so satisfying to see something finished, and I feel like this is exactly what they wanted it to be. And there's something really satisfying about a brand kind of like reaching that goal that they set for themselves. It was a very ambitious goal.
Yeah, and I remember when we met with them in Geneva 2 years ago, I think they might have had a 3D print
Yeah.
of this, and it was sort of conceptual, and there were, like I said, there's so many other projects they were working on. Couldn't get a real read of what it would be like in the metal, and like just seeing that vision come to life
Yeah.
is pretty exceptional. And another thing about the brand that I personally like, having that, the owners and the founders is that they're like they're designers, and they're also very like stylish people,
Yes.
and like you can see that like aesthetic taste and consideration. I mean, they have a vision. It's for watchmaking, but it's also like an aesthetic vision that is unique, and it really, it just comes together in a way that is sort of rare. And
Yeah. No, the watch feels like a reflection of their interests, and it feels like something they've been leading up towards for a long time. Just like the architecture of the case, I'm looking at it now. Just like the profile is just like really unlike anything else. And this is a 3D printed case, and it kind of represents to me like sort of kind of like the ultimate version of like what a 3D printed case can be. It's like it's very well finished. You wouldn't necessarily realize it's a 3D printed case to hold it and wear it, but it is very lightweight,
Yeah.
and it allows it to be very thin and to get this like really interesting case architecture that just wouldn't be common.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be possible with traditional manufacturing.
Yeah, exactly. There's two ways to make this 3D printed or hand like carve that.
Yeah.
You could not do that on a CNC, which I think was part of their intention in the design was like, what's the point of just making a 3D printed thing that you can make some other way for them at least. They wanted to go beyond that. And yeah, I mean that is an insane case.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
So let's open up the conversation to some of these other watches that we have here on the table. I've got a mix of things here. Some watches that we own, some that are in on loan. Where do you want to start?
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like looking at them as a group
Yeah.
just to start, like what these watches sort of have in common. Obviously these are independent watches from independent brands, like you said at the beginning, but they start price point wise probably at a couple $1,000s, 2,500 ish, which might be the Otsuka, and they go up to five figures.
Yeah.
Um, but like these watches are all to me like represent something like larger brands couldn't do, and thus they have the flexibility that is sort of like intrinsic to these brands that
Yeah.
might lead you to choose this watch at $4,000 over a Tudor or a Breitling, or a watch that might be like technically a better watch if you were to go straight up performance wise, because this is the Bel Canto. Like this is doing things you can't get from another brand. It shows ingenuity. It's got like, you know, I don't know, like a love for horology that is maybe missing from larger brands.
Yeah, these watches all have like a unique perspective. Like they all reflect a unique perspective. Like the Otsuka Low Tech is, it's unlike any other watch I can think of off the top of my head because it comes from someone who's like working in a very kind of like, Japanese industrial design sort of mold, and that's just not something you're going to get from a big brand. You can't do that if you're a big sort of like conglomerate owned watch brand.
Yeah.
Working independently allows you the freedom to make a crazy watch like that. Same with the Space One, and hovering as well to a large extent. This one's mechanically, quite interesting as well. It's a jump seconds,
Yeah.
regulator. That's not a movement that a large brand is necessarily going to like take the time to develop for a mass
No.
market because it's a niche product.
Very niche. I mean, I think I'm even like one of a handful of people that even knew that watch existed because Habring doesn't exactly announce things. And then
Mhm.
the second one came up available on the secondhand market. I mean, I instantly, reached out to get it because this is like the watch for me in a lot of ways
Yeah, yeah.
as a fan of all the little attributes of it. But I like weird things and I'm bored with by other things. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I'm at that point where just like a simple three-hand watch has to have a lot more going on to kind of get me going, which, you know, here you are. But yeah, exactly. That would probably fail commercially.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to talk about was some of the objections to these watches that we hear from people. The Holtenrix, for example, works out to about like $7,000 or so in US dollars. It has a Selena movement. I can just see the comments on Instagram now and on YouTube now. $7,000 for a watch with a Selena movement. Oh my God, you're crazy. To me, it doesn't seem that ridiculous when you consider everything else that has
Yeah.
kind of like gone into the watch. And I think you can make the same argument for other watches here with like base movements with mass produced movements. I think in fact most of them do, have a movement that can be traced back to like a base caliber. Like to me, these watches are about like more than just the movement. It's really about kind of like the visual design and like the fact that like this watch costs the same as like a Speedmaster,
Mhm.
like in and out of the boutique. Like I know which one I'm going for, which is like, much more interesting. But I don't know, I guess it's just a matter of taste at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's taste and appreciating, where the cost is,
Yeah.
right? Like a Speedmaster is a very well made watch, 100% beautifully finished and everything, but like they make thousands of them a year. Those watches are amortized out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of margin there. Whereas this is hand finished. We know it takes them a lot longer than they even want it to take to make one because of how complicated they are.
Mhm.
They're back ordered as such, and like you're buying it for artistry, you're buying it for finishing, you're buying it for the labor that has gone into it,
Yeah.
right? And it looks more than the other watches on this table, like it looks handmade in a way that I
Mhm.
think really speaks to it. And yes, ultimately you think that's worth it or not. By comparison, the Habring is actually very plain. It's a steel case, not very complicated, a pretty dial, but like a pad printed dial. But you have a in-house movement from Austria designed by Richard Habring, and so that's what I'm paying for there. This watch actually, though, it's Suka Low Tech. The thought did cross my mind when I was picking this up that it's a couple $1,000s and it's a Miyota 8000 series movement at the base, which like I associate with like some of the first mechanical watches I had. Like a Maritech Pilot had the same base movement in this, and that was a couple $100. And like I had to get over that myself to be like, well, it's about the complication and it's about the brand, and I don't regret it for a second. I absolutely adore this watch, but there is sometimes you have to make mental leaps, a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, it's a matter of kinda, like, understanding where the cost in a watch
Yeah,
is, and, it's, like, none of these watches like, even if they have generic movements, there's nothing generic about them. They all
yeah,
represent, like I said, a distinct point of view and a lot of thought and a lot of, kind of, like, considerations on what's important to these brands.
yeah. It's funny that this is probably the most generic watch on the table here.
The Alan Silverstein.
Yeah, because this is a off the shelf Solita movement,
Yep.
and it's a wild looking watch, and other brands have worked with Alon Silverstein, and now several Bell and Ross worked with them through the Grail watch, for example. But I think it's interesting about the Louis Erard is that no, they kind of were edgy in doing it first,
Yeah.
right? Like other people were not working with Alon Silverstein; they hadn't since the '90s or whatever when he was really popular, and they were like, "We're gonna bring back this avant-garde designer," and like that's to me where the value of this one was. It was getting this vision that you couldn't get elsewhere,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Um,
And now it feels like the avant-garde is kind of like I don't know if it's seeping into the mainstream, but it's a little bit more accepted. I think the Space One is a good example of that. This watch was a big hit, when it was introduced earlier this year. This, I believe, is gonna be the first Space One to be part of the permanent
Mm.
collection, and I think that's an interesting choice because this is really sort of like Space One at their most sort of unusual, I think, and they've chosen to make this World Timer their kind of like, you know, their flagship piece that'll always be available. You've been wearing this watch for a review that you'll be writing. What are your thoughts on the Space One? Can you give us a little preview?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is not a watch for everyone. I think that goes without saying. I really love the design conceptually, perhaps a little bit more than like practically, because I'm just used to like a different style of watch. But it's such so innovative that like I could see owning it, like legitimately, I could see having one for the experience of this strangeness of this. And yeah, I mean, also a world timer. We were just talking about world timers in another video, and I forgot, like, this is also one of the most approachably priced world timers, which, in addition to being like this super exotic watch. So there's a hell lot of value in this watch if you, want to get into it. But yeah, super cool.
Need a lefty version of that watch. Can't really wear that on my right wrist.
Yeah, you got it's exhaust out on the spaceship there.
Yeah, no, it becomes
It's not that
like
bad.
a medieval torture device.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, thanks for talking about some of these, independent watches with me. I think it's, continues to be a really exciting kind of like corner of this hobby. I feel like there's a lot of really interesting things happening, and it's represented by the group of watches that we have here on the table for sure.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in again. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Warning Wow.